Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? I was just having a discussion, having some coffee, which is like my go-to beverage in the morning, even though I know it's a little bit after 12 noon right now. But I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and he wanted to come to the workshop that I just did this past weekend, which was an afternoon of mindfulness. So we wanted to talk a little bit about mindfulness since he couldn't make it. And rather than as we were having this discussion, I was going to write a little post on mindfulness, but rather than doing that, I decided maybe I'll make a short little video on it instead, because I know a lot of people don't really read much anymore, and videos, is the way that get most people's attention. But when we talk about meditation and mindfulness techniques, many of these practices, they're a mind training tool. They're a mind training tool or exercise. And what mindfulness is really training us mindfulness is really training us on how to cultivate our awareness. Mindfulness is really sort of like the art of conscious living. It's living with more awareness and attention to life, to reality, and the present moment, which is the only moment we're truly alive in. And if we begin to watch our mind, if we begin to become aware of ourselves, we notice that 99.9% of the time, the mind is either off dwelling in the past or projecting into the future. So very rarely is the mind really ever present. It's not really here. And because of that, we're missing what life is beginning to present us, because life is presenting to us things every second. And then typically what happens is we respond out of maybe patterns or habits that have been cultivated within our lives through past experiences. But what really is happening is we're reacting, and we're often reacting not in the wisest way. So mindfulness allows us to be aware of things, see what life is presenting to us, and then decide how we want to respond to that. Now, from Eastern perspectives, awareness is actually a sense that needs to be cultivated, that needs training. And sadly, here in the United States, we don't get much training in our awareness. When they look at it as a sense, even science knows that we have more than 5 senses. Many of us are aware of, like taste, smell, touch, those 5 senses that we often talk about. But science confirms that there are more than those. For example, there's a sense called proprioception, which is a scientific sense that we have, or science says is a sense that we have. And proprioception is like, right now, I know, even though I can't see my hand, I know where it is. And I know I have 2 fingers up and they're behind my head. Well, how do I know that? Well, proprioception is the ability of us to sense ourselves in space. And a baby does not have proprioception. So if you give a baby a spoon of food, well, the food goes everywhere but the mouth. It goes on the baby's head. It goes on their shoulder. Maybe it goes halfway across the room, because the baby hasn't developed proprioception yet. It develops maybe by about 2 years of age, and then the baby can take a spoon and feed itself, because it's developed that spatial awareness. Now, there's another sense that we have known as interoception. Now, interoception is the ability to scan our internal biology. And so, how do you know that you're not feeling well today? How do you know that, you ever get up and you just feel a little bit off? Well, what happens is you begin to scan, or your awareness scans your internal biology, and you just feel that something isn't right. Well, that's interoception, or sensing internally our biology. And so the East says that awareness is a sense itself that can be learned and developed, and our awareness is something that we can sort of shut off at times or expand outwards at times. I mean, have you ever been so into a task, you're on your computer, you're working, and you're so focused on the task at hand that somebody says something to you and comes up and says something, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, what did you say? Well, your awareness was so focused, so hyper-focused, that the person who came over and talked to you, you weren't even aware that they were there. And so that's when our awareness can be sort of shut down. Have you ever been in a room full of people and you're talking to your friends, and then somebody mentions your name in a conversation maybe halfway across the room, and all of a sudden your awareness got very good because you heard a conversation about you? or you heard, your name being mentioned, and so you want to know. We're very ego-invested individuals and creatures that whenever our name comes up, we're very interested in knowing what's being said about me. And so there, the awareness was sort of expanded out. And so with mindfulness, we're training our awareness to be more present to life, to be more in the moment and aware of the moment, so we can take it out of, running off to the past and future as frequently as it does, and we can begin to develop a little bit more of a more content and peaceful way of living. Because typically when the mind goes and runs off to the past or projects into the future, it's very often going to not the most pleasant and wonderful experiences that we can remember, think about, or dream about. Very often when it goes to, think about the past, it's going back to think about things that we're upset about, that we regret, that we're angry about, a fight that we had with somebody earlier in the day or yesterday begins to still play itself over here now. Why? Because the mind goes back and dwells on those negatives. And when we project into the future, the mind isn't often going to think about all the wonderful blessings that are coming into our life. It goes and projects and think about all the things that, we're angry about or upset about, or things we need to worry. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And so it's projecting into the future, is creating these negative experiences very often that are ruining our present moment experience. How many times in your own life were you projecting into the future thinking, well, what if this goes wrong? What if that happens? Getting yourself all worried. Then when the moment actually came, did you say to yourself, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be? What was I getting myself all worried and stressed out for? And so we can see that the mind begins to sort of distort and ruin how enjoyable the moment can be by dwelling in the past or projecting into the future. And so through mindfulness practices, such as watching the breath, or, even doing a mantra, or walking meditations, or eating meditations, just keeping ourselves present to the moment begins to develop the ability to concentrate, to focus, to pay attention. So as we're doing these practices, let's say we're focusing on the breath, well, the mind might wander after every breath, and then what you do is you just refocus again. You come back to the breath again, and then after 2 or 3 breaths, the mind wanders again and gets distracted by maybe a thought, a feeling, or sensation. Just continually keep coming back as many times as needed, and as you do, you develop your attention muscle. You develop the ability to keep your mind where you want it, when you want it there, for as long as you want it there. And that's a very powerful ability, to be present like that. It really begins to overflow into everything in our lives, begins to overflow into more present and connected relationships, begins to overflow in our work, begins to overflow in the way we perceive the world around us. And so that's just a little talk on what I wanted to share about mindfulness, how it's really the art of conscious living, developing the ability to stay present with the moment. I thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Maybe I'll do more of these as I have my coffee in the morning, share a little bit of a talk. Maybe we'll call it Sacred Sips or the Spiritual Cafe. But I thank you all for your time and attention. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you soon. I do have a couple of full moon events coming up, one in Vero Beach and another one in tonight, actually, in the Atlantic up at Aquarian Dreams. But I appreciate you all. Thanks for listening. And I hope that each and every one of your days is filled with an abundance of love, health, happiness, and peace.